I never thought much about death. It was just an abstract concept, something distant, something that happened to other people. Not to me. I was a man of reason, logic, and facts. A successful defense attorney, I thrived in the world of negotiations, arguments, and courtroom battles. My job was simple: win cases, secure deals, and above all, ensure that my clients walked free. That night was supposed to be like any other. Late meetings, a few celebratory drinks with a colleague, and then the drive home in my sleek black sedan, cruising through the empty streets of the city. The rain had just begun to fall, making the pavement glisten under the streetlights. I checked my watch. Past midnight. The roads were nearly deserted. Perfect. Then it happened. One moment I was gripping the steering wheel, humming along to a song on the radio. The next, blinding headlights surged toward me from the opposite lane. A truck, swerving too fast. There was no time to react, no space to escape, just a split second of realization. This is it. The impact was deafening. Metal screeched against metal. My body jerked violently as the airbags exploded in a rush of white. A sharp pain shot through my chest, then my ribs, then nothing. Silence. I should have felt something. Pain, panic, anything. But instead, there was only an eerie stillness. I opened my eyes, expecting shattered glass, twisted wreckage, and the agonizing crawl of time as I waited for help. But I wasn't in my car anymore. I was standing in an endless, shadowy void. The air was thick and heavy, like the weight of an unseen presence pressing down on me. My breath came in short gasps. I turned, searching for something, anything. That made sense. The silence was deafening, the darkness absolute. Then a voice, deep, commanding, resonating from all around me. "Mark Whitmore, your time has come." I spun around, but there was no one there. The darkness shifted, like something unseen was moving within it. My heartbeat hammered in my chest. "Where am I?" I whispered, my voice barely audible against the oppressive silence. A golden light flickered ahead, faint at first, then growing, stronger, illuminating the space around me, and that's when I saw them, figures, dozens of them, some cloaked in shimmering light, others cast in heavy shadows. They were watching me, their expressions unreadable. Then, from the center of the glowing expanse, a throne appeared, massive, otherworldly, and seated upon it was a presence I could not fully comprehend. "Mark Whitmore," the voice boomed again, this time from the figure on the throne. "You stand before the court of truth. Today, you will answer for your life." My pulse pounded. The weight of those words crashed over me, more suffocating than the darkness itself. "Court?" I stammered. What is this?" A new voice, calm, yet laced with something heavy, answered. "It is the last trial you will ever face." I swallowed hard. I had spent my life inside courtrooms, defending those accused, bending the truth to my advantage. But now, I was the one on trial, and I had no idea what my verdict would be. I had always believed that truth was something malleable, something that could be twisted, stretched, and molded to fit a narrative. In my world, the strongest argument. One, not necessarily the most honest one. But here, in this place, there was no arguing, no negotiating, no bending the facts. The truth existed as an unshakable force, towering over me like an immutable law. The being on the throne, if it could even be called that, was unlike anything I had ever encountered. It wasn't just a figure, but a presence, shifting between light and shadow, its form impossible to grasp. It radiated authority, the kind that stripped away all pretense, leaving only raw, unfiltered reality. "Mark Whitmore," the voice echoed again, sending ripples through the air. "You have lived a life of ambition, intellect, and power. You have shaped destinies, determined fates, but what have you left behind?" The figures surrounding me, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, remained silent, their eyes fixed upon me. Some faces looked familiar, distant echoes of the past, while others were strangers, but they all had one thing in common: they knew me. "Your life is more than what you claim it to be," the voice continued. "It is what you have done, what you have chosen. Today we will see the weight of those choices." I swallowed hard. I had stood in courtrooms defending men who were guilty, attacking those who sought justice, spinning truths into illusions, and I had won, again and again. But now, I was the one being judged. The space around me shifted, no longer a vast void, but a shimmering plane of memory. Images flickered in, the air like reflections on water, forming scenes I recognized instantly, moments from my life. I saw myself standing in a courtroom, dressed in a sharp navy suit, exuding confidence as I delivered my final argument. The jury watched me with rapt attention. My client, a real estate tycoon accused of bribery and fraud, sat beside me, hands folded, an air of smug certainty in his posture. I had played my part well. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," my voice echoed, "we must not rush to condemn a man who has worked tirelessly to build opportunities for others. Are we truly so eager to destroy a life based on speculation and assumption?" I had painted him as a visionary, a philanthropist. The truth: he had destroyed lives with his greed, manipulated laws to seize homes, forced families onto the streets. The verdict had come swiftly. Not guilty. I remembered the feeling. Triumph. The subtle, satisfied smirk I had given my client as he shook my hand. But now the memory continued beyond what I had seen that day. A new scene materialized before me, a woman sitting on a park bench, clutching a worn-out photograph. Her eyes were hollow, her hands trembling. I recognized her. The wife of one of the men my client had ruined. Her husband had taken his life. Shortly after the case was closed, I had never known, I had never cared to know. Now I saw it all. The silent suffering, the weight of a verdict that had sealed a fate, the unraveling of a family that would never recover. I tried to turn away, but there was nowhere to go. "Mark Whitmore," the voice called again, softer this time. "You believed justice was a game. Tell me, do you still believe that now?" I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came. The scene dissolved, shifting once more. A new memory, a new trial. This time I stood before a judge, reviewing paperwork as a young man, barely 20, sat beside me, his wrists shackled, his eyes desperate. He had been accused of theft. Nothing grand, nothing violent. A string of poor choices driven by hunger, desperation, and circumstance. He had pleaded with me before the hearing. "Please, Mr. Whitmore, I just need someone to believe me." I had barely glanced at him. His case wasn't high profile. He wasn't important. I had done the bare minimum, and when the sentence came, 3 years behind bars, I had moved on without a second thought. Now I saw what I had ignored. I saw the loneliness in his cell, the slow corrosion of hope, the despair that settled into his bones. I saw the fight in the prison yard that left him hospitalized, the cycle of violence that swallowed him whole. And then, finally, I saw him years later, cold, unresponsive. His life ended before it had truly begun. A wasted existence. A fate. I had played a part in sealing. I staggered back, shaking my head. "No," I whispered. The unseen presence did not respond. It did not need to. I had built my life on arguments, on rationalizations, but no case I had ever fought, no excuse I had ever crafted, could change the undeniable weight of what I was seeing. I had spent my life believing that truth was something flexible, but here in this place, there was no flexibility. There was only truth. The courtroom, if it could be called that, grew silent again. The figures surrounding me remained still, their gazes heavy. The presence on the throne did not speak. I felt something I had not felt in years. Fear. Not fear of losing a case, not fear of failure or humiliation, but fear of what comes next. "Mark Whitmore," the voice finally spoke again. "You have seen your actions. Now you must understand their weight." The air thickened. The darkness grew deeper. I was no longer watching memories. I was about to receive my judgment. I braced myself, and then the light began to shift once more. The silence stretched, pressing down on me like an unseen force. My body, if I even had one in this place, felt impossibly heavy, as if the weight of my choices had become something tangible, something I could no longer escape. I stood motionless in the vast, glowing expanse of the courtroom that wasn't really a courtroom. The figures around me, the silent observers, the ones who had known me, who had suffered because of me, remained still, watching, waiting. Then the presence on the throne spoke again. "Mark Whitmore, do you understand now?" The question sent a shiver through me, though there was no cold here, no wind, no physical sensation, and yet I felt it all. The shame, the regret, the suffocating realization that my life had not been what I had convinced myself it was. My voice faltered. I swallowed hard, the weight of my guilt settling deep inside me. I didn't know. I didn't see. A pause. Then the presence's voice was both gentle and unyielding. "You chose not to see." The words cut deeper than any blade. A flicker of movement caught my eye, and I turned. Another scene was forming before me, shifting like mist, settling into shape. I recognized it instantly. It was the moment I had died. I saw myself in my car, gripping the steering wheel, the rain painting streaks across the windshield. The radio played softly in the background. The headlights of the truck surged toward me, a massive force of metal and momentum. For the first time, I saw my own expression. Shock, fear, realization. I saw the moment everything changed. The impact, the darkness, the silence. And then, something else. A figure standing at the side of the road, barely visible through the storm. A man, his clothes drenched, his posture tense. He had been there. I never saw him that night, not until now. The scene shifted again. I saw the same man, years earlier, sitting across from me in a courtroom. It was the young man I had failed to defend, the one I had abandoned to the system. My stomach twisted. I turned back to the image of the roadside. He was watching my car, his face unreadable. Then I saw him move. He had rushed toward the wreckage, pulling at the twisted metal, calling out for help. He had tried to save me, even after everything, even after I had left him to his fate. The scene faded, dissolving into the golden light that surrounded me. The presence on the throne regarded me in silence, letting the truth settle deep into my bones. "Do you understand now, Mark?" My breath hitched. "Yes," I whispered. "I do." The space around me began to shift, the figures watching me fading into the light. I expected the presence to deliver its verdict, to seal my fate, to cast me into some unknown eternity. But instead, something else happened. A second throne appeared beside the first. It was smaller, more subdued, yet no less imposing. "There is still a choice," the presence said. "One final question remains." The weight of those words settled over me. "Do you seek redemption?" The question rang through the vast emptiness, reverberating in the very core of my being. My pulse pounded. "Yes," I said without hesitation. "If it's possible, if there's a way, I want to make it right." A long silence followed. Then the presence spoke again. "Redemption is not spoken. It is lived. It is chosen. Again and again." A shift in the air, a deep pulse, like the universe itself exhaling. Then you shall return. The golden light expanded, enveloping everything. I felt myself being pulled weightless back into the place I had come from. The courtroom, the figures, the throne. Everything dissolved into nothingness, and then I gasped, air rushing into my lungs as if I had been drowning. A blinding white light filled my vision, not the ethereal glow of the otherworldly court, but the harsh fluorescence of a hospital room. Machines beeped around me. My chest ached as if my ribs had been crushed. I was alive. A nurse rushed to my side, calling for the doctor. "You're back," she whispered, eyes wide with disbelief. I turned my head slowly, my muscles sluggish, unresponsive, and then I saw him, sitting in the corner of the room, staring at me with an expression I couldn't decipher. The man from the courtroom, the man from the roadside, the young man I had abandoned all those years ago. "You," I croaked. He nodded, his eyes dark with something I couldn't name. "I was there when they pulled you out of the wreck," he said quietly. "You should have died, Whitmore, but you didn't." I swallowed hard, my throat dry as sandpaper. "Why?" I rasped. He studied me for a long moment before responding. "Because no one deserves to be left behind." The days that followed my return were a blur of hospital monitors, whispered conversations, and moments of silence that stretched into eternity. My body healed faster than my mind. The weight of what I had seen, what I had lived through, clung to me like a shadow, demanding answers that no doctor could provide. Had it been real? Had I truly stood before something greater than myself, stripped bare of my illusions, forced to see the truth of my existence? Or had it all been the fevered imaginings of a dying brain, grasping for meaning in its final moments? I didn't know, but the young man who sat by my bedside, watching me with the eyes of someone who had suffered and survived, he was real. His name was David, and the truth was, I had forgotten him. He had once been nothing more than a case file, a name on a legal brief. But now, he was a living reminder of the life I had left behind, the choices I had made, the damage I had done. "You saved me," I told him one night, my voice raw. He studied me for a moment before shaking his head. "No, you saved yourself." I wanted to believe that. But redemption wasn't a single act. It wasn't just a moment of clarity before death. It was something earned, lived, chosen, again and again. And I knew now I had work to do. Weeks later, when I finally left the hospital, the city felt different. I was different. The same streets, the same buildings, the same people, but everything seemed sharper, more fragile. I had spent a lifetime defending the guilty, justifying my own indifference. Now I would do something else. I walked into my old law firm, straight to my office, and placed my resignation letter on the desk. No more hollow victories, no more forgotten faces. The court of truth had given me a second chance. Now it was up to me to make it mean something. What would you do if your life was placed on trial? Would you be ready to face the truth? It's never too late to choose a different path.